Hello, everyone, and welcome to another thought-provoking episode of Full Throttle here on Unprecedented TV. And this is where we dive head-on into the challenges facing British drivers and much more besides that, of course. I'm Paul Naylor, Communication Director for the Alliance of British Drivers, and today we're talking with Ben Habib of Advance UK.
Hello, and I'm Brian Gregory, Policy Director of the Alliance of British Drivers. Today, we're going to talk about net zero with Ben Habib. Net zero is a large mallet that's being used as the justification to hammer every one of us with a plethora of lifestyle restrictions, dismantle UK industry and the associated jobs, and transport us back to a feudal economy, but without agriculture, as all the arable land will be carpet bombed with wind turbines or solar arrays. But does science, as opposed to the science, justify all this in economic anarchy? Let's discuss this in detail with Ben Habib. So buckle up. This is Full Throttle.
Hello, Ben.
Ben, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So, would you like to open proceedings, Ben, by telling us a bit about yourself and Advance UK?
Okay, so I'm relatively new to politics. I've been in politics since 2019. I entered the political fray in order to try and get Brexit over the line. I'm sad to report that I haven't succeeded. We might think that we've left the European Union, but actually we are very significantly still regulated by the EU, and indeed part of the United Kingdom has effectively been left behind in the European Union. The battles that we all fight on those of us who believe in a sovereign, independent United Kingdom, the battles we fight are very significantly influenced by our continued close association with the EU. We won't be able to deliver on the policies required to put British national interests first until we have properly left the EU. It is a prerequisite, including our borders, net zero, deregulating, buying British first, human rights law. Everything turns on our leaving the EU properly. And that's partly why Advance UK was set up, because there isn't a single political party, including Reform, that recognises that we haven't actually left. Farage, I think, in order to massage his own political legacy, is quite happy to say Brexit's been done. It just hasn't been done properly. No, actually, Brexit hasn't actually been done. And it's not a matter of doing it properly. If we'd done it, our politicians would be forced to do the right thing, but they can hide under the cloak of these two new treaties that Boris Johnson signed, which basically undermine Brexit. And Advance UK was a political party set up necessarily because Reform doesn't get it. I can go into the reasons why Reform doesn't get it if you wish me to, but I think it's more instructive and more informative if I just explain that Advance UK is the party that so many hope Reform should have been. And at the heart of Advance UK is a belief that the United Kingdom should be proud, sovereign, and prosperous, and that our mission statement, if delivered through a policy framework, would yield that result. And our mission statement is very simple. It's something you would expect perhaps all political parties to adhere to, but they don't. They stand in opposition to just about everything I'm about to outline it as our mission statement. But essentially, our mission statement is the nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in all its parts and for all its people. A promotion and reacquaintance of our constitution with its Christian roots, not just our Christian culture, but our constitutional Christianity, which has been so important, even though it's vacated the state. It's so important. It has been so important in guiding this country to, the greatness that we once had. Freedom of expression, freedom from indoctrination of our children, freedom to do what we wish to do, freedom to manage our cash the way we wish to manage it. Our democracy, which is so hijacked by international law and domestic quangos. We've got to reject the tentacles, as I've already touched on, of the EU, but also other supranational institutions in this country, and defang all the bureaucrats that have gained control of our democracy, and therefore undermined it through the bureaucracies such as the quangos and the bureaucracies such as Ofcom, OBR, etc.
Yeah.
And then the quaint old concept of equality under the law, which has been, in my view, set aside, like so much else in this country, by diversity, equity, and inclusion, the progressive discrimination in favor of people from ethnic minorities, minority religious beliefs, sexual preferences, transgender ideology, all of that. That has undermined equality under the law. And we often talk about a criminal justice system that is two-tiered. Actually, we don't have a justice system. What we have is a legal system. It's not dispensing justice.
Yeah.
Uh, and all the things that I just touched on, nation state, Christian constitution, freedom, democracy, equality under the law, they're all interrelated. You can't deliver one without delivering on the others. And it is this joined up political philosophy, this joined up political mission statement that is so lacking in every other political party. Reform doesn't have it, the Conservatives don't have it, Labour and of course the Lib Dems are complete lunatics, so they haven't got anything remotely close to it even. And it is through serious principle politics with this mission statement at our heart that we wish to form the policy framework and the policies and indeed the draft legislation before we get into government, so that when we get into government, we can actually just enter the Commons and slap down the draft legislation that the British people would have already approved in the general election that returned us to Parliament, and have no truck with the Lords or the civil service or anyone interfering in our policy agenda. And we drive that through, a bit like Trump, nailed 100 executive orders in his first couple of days in office. We will drive it, and it'll be more powerful in the UK because it'll be a change in legislation. The courts will not be able to challenge us. We're going to drive that through Parliament in the first 24, 48 hours of our taking office.
Right, that's a huge agenda, Ben, and it means undoing all of the things that the Blair government put into place.
Absolutely.
And there will be a huge amount of resistance from the parties, the bodies or Congress, whatever you've already mentioned, to that. But I think it's essential because everything you said chimes with what I believe has gone wrong with this country. Since I was a child in the mid-late 50s, it's gone backwards as far as I'm concerned. So I absolutely agree with all of that.
I mean, we went from being a proud sovereign country after World War II, albeit diminished economically and geopolitically by the end of our empire, but one that nevertheless was proud and prosperous and independent. Well, prosperity came back a bit later, but proud and independent. And we engaged with other great nations of the world on the international stage as a country. But over the last sort of 50 years, that has morphed, and you're absolutely right to blame Tony Blair, has morphed into our ceasing to exist as an independent entity. And we see this visibly. I don't want to go into detail because I'm sure you want to direct the conversation in the way you wish to. But we see this visibly by the taking down of our borders. You can't define a nation if it doesn't have borders which are enforced, and we don't have borders that are enforced. So by that very simple definition, we don't really exist anymore.
Yeah. And I mean, certainly, we didn't seem to have any problems in fending off German invaders, 20 miles from our beaches, but we seem to be totally unable to stem the flow of, incomers that we know nothing about. We don't know their provenance or anything. It's
an extraordinary state of affairs.
Yeah.
From 1805 to 1916, I think, when the Battle of Jutland took place, the Royal Navy was unchallengeable at sea, and Napoleon couldn't even conceive of getting to the United Kingdom because of the Royal Navy. And even during World War II, though we were a diminished state, our Navy was still formidable. And I don't know if you've seen photographs of the coronation of the Queen in 1953, but the Royal Navy was out in force for that day. And photographs of our Navy back in 1953, so immediately post-war when we were economically, quite damaged, the ships and the aircraft carriers, the frigates, the destroyers, they go as far as the eye can see in the photograph.
The primary function of government is defence of the realm, above and beyond anything else, before we go for anything else. So
and now we couldn't even muster. We talk about having to challenge Russia, and we saber rattle across the globe, and we talk about the need to be a global Britain. But without a military to back it up, I'm afraid you can't be a global Britain. And the whole thing is topsy-turvy.
Yes, absolutely, I agree. But let's focus now. I mean, one of the things that is driving the whole political agenda is net zero. And the science, when you scratch below the surface, is, well, it's not even shaky. It's completely wrong. And I've been following this for a long time. So maybe I can show a few slides and we can talk, because I think aside from all of the political stuff that we've got to do, we've got to get rid of this net zero thing, because it's impoverishing the country. It's impoverishing every one of us. It's sending our economy downwards in a spiral, and not helped by the government trying to tax us more, because, as Churchill said, taxing your way into prosperity is like standing in a bucket and trying to pull the bucket up by the handle. It doesn't work. So, let's start. If I can just, this is showing the prime tenet of these climate crazes is that the climate has been stable on Earth for eons, and it's complete rubbish, because we can go back, we can get ice cores, and we can find out what temperatures were in the past. And from vegetation samples that we find even under the ice, we can tell what the temperature was by the plants that were growing and are in effect petrified in the ice. And you can see this goes back from 2,500 BC, BCE, I think it's called now, 2000 before Christ, to 2009 AD. And you can see at the start, 2,400 years ago, it was warm. Then there's a sudden cool down. Then there's another warming, which was the Minoan warming. And that's when the Hebrews left Egypt. Then there was another cold period, like 250 BC, the Grecian Empire. Then the Roman Empire, there's a warm period. And during the warm period, they were cultivating vines in the northeast of England, north of where I live, up into Northumberland. So it was obviously quite a bit warmer than it is now. Then after the Roman Empire, we had the Dark Ages, as it was called, and it was dark and it was cold. And then following that, we had another medieval warm period, about 1300 AD. And then we were plunged into the Little Ice Age, when the Thames regularly froze in the winter and they had ice bears. And then the cycle turned again, and we got the current warm period, but it's a bit flaky in comparison. As you can see, we've had two peaks. And we've returned to the sort of zero position, which is sort of, null difference. So we're about where the calculations what the climate should be, around 285 Kelvin, about 15 Celsius. We're there on average. So there's no question that the climate has varied around, and there was nobody driving SUVs or any of these other things in this period. So the only thing we can be driving is natural variation, because we weren't contributing much carbon dioxide to the atmosphere at the time, other than, from burning wood and stuff like that, was minor sort of contributor. But so if we go on to the next slide, Charlotte, please, slide 4. Oh, no, that's gone back the other way. Never mind. No, keep going, because they're just showing the same sort of thing. This is the one I like, because that's the chart you've just seen, but it shows you rather than the smooth vision, it shows you the sharp peaks that we've had. And there were quite tight periods over which the temperature rose a lot and fell a lot. And you can see I mentioned Minoan warming, Roman warming, medieval warming, and then there was the Little Ice Age, and you can see where we are. We're here with the big blue arrow. So there's nothing unusual about the temperatures that we are experiencing at the moment. And contrary to what the media say, there's no evidence of any increase in wildfires. If anything, wildfires have gone down. The seas aren't rising. In fact, these islands where Guterres, the UN General Secretary, is a maniac, was standing up to his knees in water, those islands are actually rising out of the sea. They're not losing area to ocean rise. They're gaining area because the land's being pushed up from underneath. So it's complete rubbish. And just, I mean, to hammer it home, Charlotte, if you can show that YouTube video from Stefan Jürgen Pedersen, please. This is I think it was a BBC.
This ice is from the Viking Age, around the year 1000, also called the medieval warm period. We believe that in Greenland, the medieval warm period was about 1.5 degrees warmer on average than today.
Nordgrip, the Greenland ice core project, is being reopened to drill the last few meters through the ice sheet to the rock beneath the research station. The ice core, over 3 kilometers in length, has been hauled up to the surface piece by piece and contains important data on the history of the climate of the Earth. It bears the fingerprints of climatic conditions over more than 120,000 years.
When we remove or drill the ice core, we leave a hole, and we insert a thermometer in the hole. We are able to map out the temperature through the 3-kilometer ice sheet. Now that temperature, if we do it precisely enough, a thousandth of a degree accuracy, then the ice has not forgotten how cold or warm it was on the surface at the time the snow fell. So, using those temperatures, we have been able to reconstruct the temperatures of the last 10,000 years. Here we have our picture of the temperature reconstructions that we have from Greenland in a graphical form. And if we go back along this axis, it's going back in time. This is the last 8,000 years we have plotted here. On this axis, we have the temperatures at the site in Greenland, and we can see that if we go back from now about 4,000 years ago, we would have temperatures up here for about 4,000 years that were 2.5 degrees warmer on average than today. Now, as we approach our time, we can see that in the period between 4,000 years ago and back to the period 2,000 years ago, which is actually the Roman age, the temperatures have been decreasing in Greenland by 2.5 degrees. Then the temperatures increased gradually up to a maximum point around the medieval warm period, we call it 1,000 years ago. And then temperatures declined and goes down to a minimum around 1650 AD, comes back up a little in the 18th century, and then around 1875 we have the lowest point in the last 8,000 years, right here, and that matches exactly the time when meteorological observations started.
I think this is essential viewing
Other core
for any
samples from
politician.
elsewhere in Greenland confirm that the Little Ice Age ended about 140 years ago, at the coldest point in the last 10,000 years. The natural, pronounced alteration of warm and cold periods back in time has also been confirmed elsewhere in the Northern Hemisphere. Carbon-14 dating of organic matter from peat bogs and tree rings confirms the pattern. So do data from stalactite caves in China and measurements from North Africa.
The problem is that and I agree completely that we have had a global temperature increase in the 20th century. Yes, but an increase from what? Probably an increase from the lowest point we've had for the last 10,000 years. And this means that it will be very hard indeed to prove whether the increase of temperature in the 20th century was man-made or it's a natural variation. That will be very hard because we made ourselves an extremely poor experiment. We started to observe meteorology at the coldest spot in the last 10,000 years.
I think that pretty much sums it up.
It's a great video. Great video.
Yeah, it is. So that's for me, the first sort of elephant in the room, the chronology. Then if you actually start looking at the timing of the warmings relative to changes in carbon dioxide concentration, and that's slide 6, please, Charlotte.
I'm sold, by the way, on I don't know if you're trying to sell me. I'm sold.
trying to do is get people to understand that this idea that we're going to see. No, it's all right. Leave that on. We'll not worry about it. But
Yeah.
well,
I mean,
yeah.
I'm no expert, but and I wouldn't wish to profess to be an expert. I don't think I even need to make the arguments, because even if man-made climate change was taking place, net zero is clearly not the answer. You know, the whole thing is madness. But of course, by the way, I don't know when you were at before this show started. You kindly mentioned, Brian, that you were at St. Catherine's. You did chemistry at St. Catherine's, Oxford. Well, I did natural sciences, which is the Cambridge equivalent.
Yes, yeah. Well, what's natural sciences? Chemistry. Mine was natural sciences. I'm probably one of the few people that's got a BA in chemistry.
Right, and I specialize in chemistry too. And one of the things that I learned very early on in my time in science is that most systems tend to try and self-balance. I mean, I'm not saying that you can assume this to be the case for every system, but no system would exist as a system if it didn't self-correct. It would cease to exist pretty damn quickly. And the Earth has been around, what, 4 billion years, and it has supported life for what, the last, you'd have to tell me, few 100 million years minimum. Few 100 million years, I think that's about right. You'd have to correct me if I got my facts wrong. But it's only been able to do that because it tends to stability. And I think the arguments being made by those who fear we're about to burn up in a ball of fire are basically arguing that our system is out of kilter and our system will not self-correct. You have to buy those two things. And I don't buy them because they're just plainly not evidenced by anything that's gone before, which we're all of us familiar. And the other point I'd like to make, which I think, Paul, I don't know whether you're as old as I am. You look perhaps younger than I am.
I was born in 1970, so I'm about 5 years younger than you. Good.
Yeah, 5 years younger than me. But you might recall, Brian looks more comparable in age.
Yeah, I was born in 54.
54. Okay, so I was born in 65. You will definitely remember, Brian, that in the 70s, people used to talk about us going into the world going into a second ice age.
Yes.
I remember.
I remember as a child thinking, oh my God, we have two fears. One, we're going to get blown up by nuclear bombs, because that used to be the fear that was put around for all children. A really brilliant way to put it up. You know, you're going to get decimated any second. And the other one was that we're going to end up in an ice age. This whole global warming thing is a relatively new fear. And I think the last thing I'd like to say is that science is a very, very peculiar animal. It is prepared to be hijacked by politics. And we've seen many, many periods in the past in scientific evolution, because science hasn't trodden a straight road to where it got to. It's had many, ups and downs itself. It's been prone to manipulation. And if anyone thinks that the whatever scientific theory they're listening to in order to justify global warming being the catastrophic development that it's being painted to be, if they think that that is absolutely settled and the science has absolutely got it right, well, they just need to go back to Newtonian mechanics and realize, actually, Newton was accepted as being right, and he was fundamentally wrong for hundreds of years.
And of course, at one stage when the church was controlling the science, the universe was what do they call it? Where the universe revolved around
the Earth was. We were a geocentric universe.
And the sun revolved around it. And of course, at points, Da Vinci and the other guy Copernicus were threatened with all sorts of horrendous penalties for saying,
as people like you and I are now, because we just won't buy this catastrophe theory. And I saw Bridget Phillipson, who is the education secretary for Labour. That's probably at least paradoxical title, almost certainly self-contradictory. She's now she's brought in a new syllabus which is going to teach children about climate change. It's also going to teach them about how to spot fake news, which is basically going to be more indoctrination of our children. But she's going to teach them about climate change. So they're not even going to have the opportunity to think themselves on the issue. They're going to be indoctrinated.
And I think that's one of the worst developments in following on from the Blair era, because when I went to university, they taught us how to think, not what to think.
Absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
they tried God and the bomb to put fear into people's hearts. Then try someone else
Yeah.
now, haven't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think you can certainly prove from the science that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is about 0.04%, and the human contribution to that is 3.5% of 0.04%. So it's not very much at all. And the other thing is that the warming effect from carbon dioxide is logarithmically declining.
Yeah. So
And
you can keep pumping it in. It's not going to make much difference.
And so the equilibrium climate sensitivity, as they call it, what's the effect of doubling CO2? Well, the estimates that they started with were about 5 degrees Celsius, but now they're down to anywhere between half a degree and a quarter of a degree for every doubling of CO2. So if you doubled from 400 to 800, you might get a half to a quarter of a degree. And if you doubled it from 800 to 1600, you might get another half or quarter of a degree. So, and we haven't got enough accessible carbon in the ecosystem, because aquatic life, it actually absorbs carbon dioxide and uses it to form the shells of these mollusks. And when they die, of course, they sink to the bottom of the ocean. And under the huge pressures there, they get compacted down into carboniferous rock. And once it's there, we can't get it, because you'd have to go down there, dig it out, and then calcine it to gain the carbon dioxide. Yeah. So the whole thing is insane. But from any kind of economic perspective, it's insane. We in the UK now produce. Oh yes. Oh, thank you for putting this up. I don't know if you've seen this, Ben, but there's a document or a website called UK Fires, FIRES.
Yeah.
And UK Fires is an organisation that was of Cambridge, Oxford, and I think University College London academics who were asked, how can we get to net zero and what have we got to do? And it was £5 million of public money was used to fund this, ivory tower academics. And the key things to pull out of it are there will be no commercial flying by 2050. All the major airports will be closed, so you can forget your package holiday. Commercial shipping will be finished, so we won't be able to import or export anything, and you certainly won't be able to go on a cruise. That's right out of the window. And then fossil fuels, no fossil fuels will be used. The huge problem with that, they don't seem to understand, there's about 6,000 products derived from fossil fuels that we rely on for everything, including antibiotics, medical appliances, fuels, of course. Plastics, exactly. We just can't do without, and nobody seems to.
Fertilizer.
Absolutely, fertilizer. The whole thing is just completely insane. But this is the playbook that government is quietly working to, covertly, without using it.
They're either bloody stupid or they're hijacked by some force, aren't they? And I mean, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but they're doing a damn good job at destroying the country.
Yeah, absolutely. And the industry that I was involved in, which was titanium pigments, the factory where I used to work is just up the road in Hartlepool. And apparently, because of the way the energy costs are going, the owners, which were Huntsman and Venator, have sold out to the Chinese. And the Chinese are moving into the plant, presumably will asset strip it, take any technology that's advantageous over to China and shut the place down. And that's been the picture that's been going on for quite a while now, and it's insane.
We're de-industrializing the United Kingdom. We talked a bit about the military at the beginning. We can't even begin to have a proper military if we de-industrialize and get rid of our energy independence. How the hell are we going to fight Russia? Starmer's desperate for a scrap with Russia. Well, a bit of energy would be helpful.
Yeah, certainly would. But dispatchable, reliable energy, not renewables. Because
quite.
It's unreliable. It's an insane policy.
They're just mad. They're mad. They're mad.
Yeah. So I mean, and the other thing is the economics of it. You look at the way that, as you say, we've deindustrialized. Our energy consumption per capita now is a lot lower than China's. China's is going up like that. I don't know if you can show that.
I mean, they're looking at us and thinking we're complete idiots.
Yes.
And we've destroyed our economy on the back of importing cheap Chinese cat, destroyed our energy independence and made China powerful in the process. We can't even buy steel. We can't make steel anymore, really. We have to get it from
No,
abroad.
not certainly not precision, high grade steel. No.
Seriously vulnerable if it comes to having to make tanks and ships and whatnot. The Chinese just must be looking at us thinking, what is this country doing?
Yeah.
And they must be laughing all the way to the bank, literally, because
I'm sure they've been,
we've enriched them.
Yeah,
all our damage is enriched them.
Yeah, and of course they have infiltrated all of our educational establishments. There's loads of Chinese students, graduates, and I suspect a lot of Chinese Communist Party money being funneled indirectly into UK universities. So they've probably been conducting a campaign of sort of.
Oh, it's a bit like Starmer the other day saying how brilliantly he'd done doing a free trade deal with India. So he's opened up our markets to India. We're much richer than India, but we have very highly regulated markets, very expensive energy, very constrained employment law, which makes it much more expensive for us to employ people here. They have no real employment law in India. They're buying Russian gas in breach of sanctions at below the market price. And they are going to manufacture goods, have open access to British markets, and stuff us full of cheap Indian goods, undermining our producers, undermining our labor, pulling out the rug from our economy. I mean, you literally couldn't make this up. And all the Financial Times and the press are going, oh great, we've got a free trade deal with India. I'm looking at it thinking, oh my God, that is not what we need. What we need to do is to make this country capable of trade on the international stage by ditching net zero, ditching these regulations, freeing up employment for employers, which, by the way, increases employment rather than decreasing it. The more restrictions you put on employers, the less employment you get. It's a bit like tax in the way that you describe tax. Exactly. You're not going to get employers to employ people if you make it bloody expensive for them to do it. And so on and so forth. So we're doing everything to damage this country. And yet the voices like yours and mine, who wish to do what is so commonsensically obviously the right thing to do, are absolutely vilified. They are compared to swivel-eyed lunatics because they can't make the arguments to defeat us, so they have to rubbish us in order to do it, which is why we also have a clampdown on freedom of speech, because if you're going to purport and promote extreme ideologies, you've got to shut the people up because they might speak out. That's why we're seeing our freedom of speech so hijacked. Yes. Sorry, I've gone ahead of the discussion.
Because again, all of this stuff about DEI and the rest of it is actually being used to, as you say, camp the law so that we're not equal under the law. It's the system's completely broken. And
the Equality Act does anything but make us equal.
Yeah, exactly. It discriminates against the majority, and that's why so many people are getting so angry about this whole thing.
It all has to go. The whole lot has to go. Yeah. But I don't know if you're aware. I know you'd be perfectly aware that Theresa May put the obligation to get to net zero by 2050 on the statute books when she had already been ousted as prime minister. It was her parting gift to the British people. But then Boris Johnson, the deal that he's done with the European Union, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, includes a provision in it which prohibits us from regressing from any domestic statute on our statute books in terms of the environment, even ones which have a future effect. So under international treaty now, we will not be able to remove from our statute books Theresa May's gift to the British people of net zero by 2050. We have to terminate our arrangement with the European Union. And that's why I kind of started this discussion with the EU, because the EU has got us in a vice. Yes. We can't move. And people like Farage, because he's so keen to be able to say, I'm Mr. Brexit, I got Brexit done, isn't prepared to call out the very document which defeats his raison d'etre for the last 25 years. And that's why a party like Advance has to exist, because we've got to be brave. And we're not that brave. It's just common sense. A minor bit of courage would enable any individual to call this out. We've got to have that minor bit of courage to say what's what.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But as you say, they're trying to make it progressively more and more difficult to actually have common sense discussions about energy policy or anything. And we've had Catherine Porter on this program. I don't know if Catherine, she is absolutely brilliant.
She's very good, but for reasons that are not clear to me, she's still a member of the Conservative Party. I can't understand the thinking going on there.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah.
That's a separate
Keep on the
discussion.
subject of energy policy. She can, basically. I totally agree, because I think the Conservative. Well, as George Galloway said, the Green Blob. He said that what was it? Two cheeks of the same bottom, basically. The Conservatives and Labour, and you can't actually shove a cigarette paper into the.
No, between the two cheeks of the bottom.
I can't just like Catherine's, because she's a very clever lady, but very supremely bright. Because I believe the Green Blob is very dangerous, because they just legitimise all this rubbish that's coming from the EU, and they don't make any attempt to gainsay it or to oppose it. Tell you, but we're talking to Anne Widdecombe later in the week, and we ended.
Give her my love.
We will. Yeah.
Another fantastic lady, but for reasons that are not clear to me, still wed to reform.
Yeah.
Tell her to get a decent political party.
I'll have a chat.
We're going to try and talk to her about road safety, and that was the last that bit's been spliced from the other document.
Right.
I would say so. I mean, I think you basically told us anyway, Ben. You would repeal net zero. You would take a chainsaw to the legal system as it stands.
Bonfire of regulations and law.
The one that Cameron promised us, the bonfire of the Quangos, that never actually.
He actually extended their powers. But we are literally going to have it. We're going to have all the draft legislation ready. So that when we go into Parliament, it's already been approved by the British people. That's very powerful. It's not just a set of woolly drafted manifesto pledges.
Yeah.
It'll actually be legislation that the British people would have voted on, because it'll be in our manifesto. And so the Lords can't stop us. The civil service won't be able to. We'll also have laws, by the way, which is going to pull the rug out from under the civil service at day one. So we're going to be like a sledgehammer, and the British people are crying out for it. The next British government is not going to be anything from the so-called left, the globalists, anti-British lot. The next British government is going to be a pro-British government. All that remains to be determined is the complexion and the extent to which it will be pro-British. And I hope that Advance UK is that government, because we will be able to do exactly what's required. The Conservative Party, as much as they say they're pro-British, aren't. They're still part of the unit party in my mind. And Farage doesn't know whether he's coming or going. He hasn't really got a clue about life. So we do need, he may wear Union flag socks. That's about as serious as it gets in terms of his political philosophy. So we do need an Advance UK government. And I hope you two gents are sold on this, the way you try to sell me on climate change. I hope you're sold on Advance UK, and you will join straight up, and you will get your families and their relations and your colleagues and everyone else to sign up. Please do it.
Okay. One last question, though, Ben. One of the problems that I see with any of the parties now is they have a manifesto, which at times is quite woolly and ill-defined, but once they get into government, they just chuck it away. And my view is that if you have a manifesto, you have to stick to the pledges by law.
Absolutely.
I think it should be.
Well, that's why we're going. That's also partly why we're going to have the draft legislation there. There will be no wriggle room. It won't be that we said, oh, we'll do this, but actually we've kind of half done it. We will have the draft legislation. So the British people, gents like yourself and others, will be able to pick up our manifesto, click on the addenda, because it'll probably be online, and look at the draft legislation which will give effect to the policies. And we will simply go into Parliament, and we'll have no ability to vary it ourselves, because you would have approved it. So we go into Parliament and we just put it down and say, listen, gents, really, we can do 5 years worth of business on day one because the British people have approved this. No redrafting required. We don't need the Lords to tinker with it. We don't need lots of amendments. It's already been approved by the court of the British people. And that's going to be so powerful. It's never been done in British politics
No.
before.
It sounds extremely powerful. I would ask that at some point we can, outside of this discussion, I've got very strong views on road safety and how it's being conducted in the UK. I'd be happy to take that offline with you to discuss that.
Yeah, please do.
It's going completely wrong because the key things that cause accidents are not being addressed. It's being misdirected to make money, basically, and not save lives.
I'm sure.
So that's for another time.
Yes, it is for another time indeed. But I would like to have that discussion with you.
Absolutely, yes. Well, thank you ever so much for your time.
It's
been brilliant.
It's enjoyable, interesting, well, intriguing. Yes, so we will be following, and I would like to, invite you back in the future to see how things are going.
Come on. And just to remind your viewers, the last decent prime minister we had was a chemist.
Yes, she was. You're quite right. You're quite right. She was. It's a good place to finish up. Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. That was really good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All the best. Thank you.